602 AD, the sea is on fire. 200 enemy ships surround Constantinople. Then the Byzantines unleash something impossible, a weapon that burns on water and cannot be extinguished. They called it Greek fire, and when Constantinople fell, the formula died with it. 3,000 years earlier, a pharaoh was buried with a blade from space. Not symbolic, not ceremonial, meteoric iron. Modern analysis confirmed it. The metal came from a meteorite. In the Middle East, swords were forged with patterns like flowing water. In 2006, scientists found carbon nanotubes inside the steel. Viking swords made with steel 8 centuries ahead of Europe. Rocket artillery appearing in the year 1409. Volcanic glass sharper than surgical steel. Sunlight turned into a weapon. A flexible sword that could kill its own master. Different civilizations, different centuries, same pattern. Advanced knowledge appears, persists for generations, then vanishes. Not myths, not legends. These weapons are documented, measured, analyzed, and we still cannot fully explain them. These are the 10 ancient weapons that history cannot comfortably explain. Countdown begins. Number 10. The weapon that fired faster than a machine gun. 2,000 years ago. This is the Chu Ko Nu. 1 lever, pump forward, pump back. 10 bolts in 15 seconds. No pause. No reload between shots. A gravity-fed magazine dropped each bolt into place, automatically. The same motion cocked the string, loaded the bolt, and fired it. One continuous cycle. On a defensive wall, dozens firing together created suppressive fire. Not power, volume. It sacrificed range and penetration. Effective distance? About 70 meters. But here's what matters. It stayed in military service for nearly 2,000 years. From the Warring States period to the First Sino-Japanese War, the same design. Meanwhile, Europe never adopted anything like it. Other civilizations experimented with repeating weapons. They did not persist. So here's the question. Why did only China refine and preserve this design for 2 millennia? Was it inferior or simply specialized? Number 9 takes that idea and turns it into rocket artillery. Cut. Number 9. Korea. 1409. At first glance, it looks like a wooden wagon. Then someone lights the fuses. 200 rockets explode into the sky in less than 1 minute. This was the Hwacha. Rocket artillery in the early 15th century. 200 launch tubes arranged in precise rows, each loaded with a gunpowder rocket arrow. Effective range, nearly 500 meters. Before European cannons were accurate at that distance, a trained crew could reload it in under a minute. This was not symbolic, it was tactical. In 1593, at the Battle of Hangzhou, a small Korean force used Hwachas to repel a vastly larger Japanese army. 200 projectiles at once is not precision, it is saturation, and saturation creates terror. That was the real weapon. The same multi-launch principle would appear again, 5 centuries later, in Soviet rocket artillery. But here's the part that should bother you. This cart launched 200 rockets without destroying itself. Angle calculations, identical propellant loads, controlled ignition timing. In 1409. So why didn't Europe develop anything similar until centuries later? Number 8 is even more dangerous because it could kill its own master. Number 8. The weapon that can kill its own master. At first it looks harmless, like a strip of steel. Then with a sudden burst of speed, it moves. 4 feet of flexible razor-sharp metal. It wraps, then cuts when pulled taut. Some versions had 2, even 4 parallel blades. More power, more risk. In Kerala's Kalaripayattu tradition, students trained for years before touching it. 12 years of prior weapons mastery was often required. because one mistake meant self-inflicted death. Unlike a rigid sword, the Urumi has no fixed trajectory. The blade flows and moves with its own momentum, and this is where it becomes strange. The steel must flex repeatedly, without snapping. Spring-tempered steel that holds an edge, yet bends like a whip. Historical references appear by the 16th century, but the metallurgical precision is advanced. Europe would not widely develop reliable spring steel until later. So how did smiths in southern India achieve this balance of carbon content and tempering cycle? This is not brute force engineering. It is precision metallurgy hidden inside martial tradition. But if you think one blade is dangerous, wait until you see the weapon that conquered continents for 3,000 years. Number 7. A weapon so efficient, it never needed improvement. At 200 meters, the arrow punches through armor. This is the composite bow. 3 materials, always in the same order. Wood at the core, horn on the compression side, sinew on the tension side. When drawn, the horn on the inside compresses, while the sinew on the outside stretches. This allows energy to be stored with maximum efficiency. Fragments date back nearly 3,000 years. Scythians, Parthians, Huns, Mongols. This resulted in the exact same structure every time, across thousands of miles. From Eastern Europe to East Asia, across thousands of miles, the core design barely changes at all. They all share the same recurve angles, the same rigid tips, and even the same lamination sequence. Construction took up to a year. Materials had to cure, dry, stabilize. In this difficult process, there was absolutely no room for error. But here's the part that stands out. Normally, innovation creates variation. Experimentation inevitably leaves mistakes. This was a completely different philosophy, using entirely different materials than the rest of Europe. Yet for millennia, the composite bow remains structurally consistent. How did knowledge this precise stay uniform across continents without blueprints? Was it traveling master craftsmen, or a tradition too fragile to experiment with? If the bow mastered stored energy, the next weapon mastered something even sharper than steel. Number 6. 1521. Spanish cavalry charges into battle. Steel armor, war horses, firearms. They believed they were unstoppable. Then they met this, the Macuahuitl. Spanish accounts claim a single strike severed a horse's head. Exaggeration? Possibly. But obsidian fractures at a molecular level. A modern scalpel edge measures around 300 nanometers. Obsidian can be nearly 1/10 of that. It could slice flesh with terrifying efficiency. Not durable, but devastating. The blades were replaceable, a composite design centuries ahead of its time. Shaping obsidian requires precision. Too thin, and it shatters. Too thick, and it loses its edge. So why did armored Europeans fear what looked like a wooden club? Because sharpness is not about material prestige. It is about physics. Yes, obsidian breaks. But in close combat, one clean strike is enough. And when the Aztec Empire fell, the weapon vanished with it. No intact examples survive. All we have are fragments, experimental reconstructions. But if volcanic glass could rival steel, imagine turning sunlight itself into a weapon. Cut. The terror of the Spanish cavalry wasn't just the steel, it was the momentum. Their armor felt like an impenetrable shell against traditional arrows. But the Aztecs weren't just using tradition, they were using geology. Obsidian, the volcanic glass, born from the Earth's fire, Every blade was a masterpiece of controlled fracture. The weight of the wood provided the crushing force of a club. The blades provided the surgical precision of a razor. On the fields of Tenochtitlan, two worlds of engineering collided. They expected primitive sticks. They found sophisticated lethality. Even if the blade broke, the fragments remained like glass shrapnel. The jaguar and eagle warriors were the elite operators of this tech. Accounts of beheaded horses may have been psychological warfare, but the physical potential was undeniable. It was a weapon of absolute trauma. Steel bends and dulls, obsidian stays sharp until it shatters. Logistically, it was perfect. You didn't need a forge, just a volcano. Obsidian trade routes fueled the Empire's military machine. The natural adhesives used were as strong as any modern epoxy. During the final siege, the Macuahuitl was the last line of defense. It didn't need to cut the steel, it just needed to find the gaps. When the fire died down, 1,000 years of weapon evolution was gone. The wood rotted, the resin dissolved. Only the glass remained. Archaeologists find the fragments, but the soul of the weapon is lost. Reconstructions try to capture that terrifying balance of wood and glass. The Macuahuitl was the physical embodiment of the volcano's power. It remains a symbol of an empire that refused to be outclassed, a ghost of a weapon that once made iron look obsolete. Because when nature makes a blade, it doesn't need a factory. The sharpness of the sun, the weight of the earth, the Macuahuitl, ending now, cut. Number 5, 212 BC. The Roman fleet advances on Syracuse. Number 5, 212 BC. The Roman fleet advances on Syracuse. Then something truly strange begins to happen. Something strange happens as the blinding light catches the harbor. The ships begin to burn, not from arrows, from sunlight. The ships begin to burn, not from arrows, from sunlight. According to later accounts, Archimedes arranged mirrors along the walls. According to later accounts, Archimedes arranged mirrors along the walls. He focused the sun's rays into a single point of heat. He focused the sun's rays into a single point of heat. For centuries, historians dismissed it as legend. Then modern experiments tested the idea. For centuries, historians dismissed it as legend. Then modern experiments tested the idea. Under the right conditions, it worked. Wood ignited, not instantly, but measurably. Under the right conditions, it worked. Wood ignited, not instantly, but measurably. But here's the problem. Battlefields are chaotic. Ships move. Light shifts. Clouds interfere. As a practical weapon, likely unreliable. As a practical weapon, likely unreliable. As a psychological weapon, different story. As a psychological weapon, different story. Imagine your ship catching fire with no visible source. Imagine your ship catching fire with no visible source. Archimedes understood geometry better than anyone in his time. If anyone could calculate focal angles, it was him. Even a partial array could create heat concentration, enough to frighten. Even a partial array could create heat concentration, enough to frighten. So was it a superweapon or a terrifying demonstration of physics? So was it a superweapon or a terrifying demonstration of physics? Because the next weapon did not rely on legend. It fell from the sky. Because the next weapon did not rely on legend. It fell from the sky. Number 4. A blade that did not come from Earth. In 1922, archaeologists opened the tomb of Tutankhamun. Wrapped beside the young pharaoh's body was an iron dagger. There was one problem. This was the Bronze Age. Iron was rarer than gold. In 2016, scientists tested the blade's composition. Nickel levels were unusually high. The signature matched meteoric iron, iron that formed in space, a fallen star forged into a weapon. But meteoric iron is unpredictable. It contains irregular nickel distribution. Heated too much, and it becomes brittle. Yet this blade shows no cracking, no structural failure. Evidence suggests it was shaped at lower temperatures, cold-worked with precision. Centuries later, early ironsmiths struggled with brittleness. This dagger did not. Ancient texts even referred to iron as metal from the sky. They knew it was different. So how did Bronze Age craftsmen master a material most cultures had not yet learned to smelt? Because the next weapon was not forged from the sky. It was forged centuries ahead of its time. Number 3, a Viking sword that should not exist, stamped into the blade, a name, Ulfberht. More than 170 examples have been found across Europe. Dating from roughly 800 to 1000 AD, modern testing revealed something strange. The steel contains carbon levels around 1%. That is crucible steel, a process requiring extremely high temperatures and precise control. European furnaces at the time were not capable of consistently producing this quality. One explanation suggests imported steel from the Middle East, possibly from Wootz-producing regions. But here's the tension. We see finished masterpieces. We do not see development stages, no obvious learning curve, no failed prototypes in large numbers. We do find counterfeits, lower quality blades imitating the name, which means the originals were known to be superior, recognized as elite weapons. So who was Ulfberht? A master smith, a workshop brand, a controlled production network. Large-scale European production of similar quality steel would not appear until centuries later. But if Ulfberht steel feels ahead of its time, the next blade may have contained structures we only recognized in the 21st century. Cut.
Number 2. A blade with patterns like flowing water. Number 2. A blade with patterns like flowing water. Strong enough to cut, flexible enough to bend. Strong enough to cut, flexible enough to bend. For centuries, Damascus steel blades were considered the finest in the world. For centuries, Damascus steel blades were considered the finest in the world. For centuries, Damascus steel blades were considered the finest in the world. Then around 1750, production stopped. The method vanished, an ancient secret lost to time. In 2006, researchers examined authentic blades under electron microscopes. In 2006, researchers examined authentic blades under electron microscopes. They discovered microscopic carbon nanotubes and cementite nanowires, structures only formally identified in modern materials science. These nanostructures contribute to both strength and flexibility. Without modern chemistry, a marvel of ancient engineering, the steel likely originated from Indian crucible ingots known as Wootz. Precise carbon content, slow cooling cycles, repeated heating and forging aligned carbide structures into visible patterns. Repeated heating and forging aligned carbide structures into visible patterns. One theory suggests specific or sources were depleted. Trace elements may have been essential. Modern metallurgists have come close, but identical mechanical properties remain difficult to reproduce consistently. So here is the deeper question. If the process was purely material dependent, why did the knowledge not adapt? Why did the tradition collapse instead of evolving? Why did the tradition collapse instead of evolving? Because the final weapon did not disappear gradually. It was guarded for 7 centuries and then erased.
Number 1. The sea burned. In 672 AD, 200 ships surrounded Constantinople. The defenders unleashed a liquid weapon through bronze tubes. Upon the slightest contact, it ignited instantly, and it burned on water. Men leapt overboard to escape, only to find the ocean itself was on fire. The formula was a state secret, restricted to the imperial family. To reveal the secret meant certain execution. For nearly 7 centuries, the Byzantines maintained control of the recipe. Then in 1453, Constantinople fell, and then the ancient knowledge vanished completely. Modern chemists have recreated flammable mixtures, petroleum, sulfur, quicklime, but none fully match historical descriptions. Accounts describe fire that clung, that could not be put out easily. So what made it different? a lost catalyst, a missing ingredient, or knowledge never written down. Greek fire, Damascus steel, Ulfberht blades, meteoric iron, rocket artillery, sunlight weapons, different cultures, different eras, same pattern. Knowledge appears, persists, then disappears. We assume progress is permanent. History suggests it is not. Look at them again. Look at them once more. They are from different centuries. They are from different continents. There was no shared language. There was no shared empire. There was no shared blueprint. Yet each civilization reached moments of extraordinary precision. These were moments of mastery. The pattern is not steady progress. It is rise, stability, then collapse. Knowledge disappears, not because it was impossible, but because it was fragile. Sometimes the artisans die, sometimes the empire falls, sometimes the recipe is never written down. We walk past these artifacts and assume we understand them. Today we call ourselves truly advanced. But what happens if the chain breaks? The Byzantines believed their fire would protect them forever. We assume progress is permanent. History suggests it isn't.